Chapters 43 through 48 of the Book of Ezekiel from the Holy Bible in Modern English, translated by Ferrar Fenton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Mark Penfold. Chapter 43. He then brought me to the gate facing towards the east. And I saw the glorious God of Israel come from the way of the east, with a sound like the sound of many waters. And the earth was enlightened by his splendor. And the appearance of the vision that I saw was like the appearance which I saw when I came to the destruction of the city, and visions like the appearance that I saw by the great river, and I fell on my face. But the glorious life came to the temple by way of the gate that faces towards the east, and the wind lifted me up and brought me to the inner court, and I saw the house full of the splendor of the life. Then I heard from the temple an address to myself, and a man came and stood beside me, and said to me, "Son of Adam, the place for my throne and the place for the soles of my feet, where I will stay amongst the children of Israel forever. For the house of Israel will not again degrade my holy name, they and their kings, by their whoredoms and the carcasses of their kings when dead, by placing their threshold by my threshold, and their doors by my doors, with only a wall between me and them, by which they degraded my holy name, by the depravities which they practiced. Therefore I consumed them in my anger. Now let them remove far from me their fornications and the carcasses of their kings, and I will stay amongst them forever. You, son of Adam, inform the house of Israel about this temple, and let them be ashamed of their vices, and let them restore its beauties. And if they are ashamed of all they have done, portray the temple and its form, and exits and entrances, and shape, and let them know its arrangements and ordinances, and draw them for their observation, and let them preserve all its plans, and all its arrangements and use. The foundations of the temple shall be the top of this hill. All round its circumference is sacred. These are the foundations. And these are the measurements of the altar by cubits, of a cubit and a handbreadth. The breast a cubit, and a cubit the breadth, with a border around of 7 inches, and the back of the altar the same. And from the breast of the ground to the lower landing 2 cubits, and the width 1 cubit. And from the lesser landing to the larger landing 4 cubits, and the breadth a cubit, and the hearth 4 cubits, with 4 horns rising up from the hearth. But the hearth shall be 12 long by 12 broad, a self-contained square. And the landing shall be 14 long by 14 broad, a perfect square, with a border around it of half a cubit, with a breastwork of a cubit around it, with a staircase facing the east. Then he said to me, "Son of Adam, thus says the mighty Lord, these are the instructions for the altar, when they make it, to offer burnt offerings upon, and sprinkle blood upon. You shall provide for the priests of the Levites, who are of the family of Zadok, who approach to me, says the mighty Lord, to offer to me a bullock from the fold for consecration. And he shall take some of its blood, and put upon the 4 horns, and upon the 4 faces of the landings, and upon the surrounding enclosure and consecration, and consecrate it, and expiate for it. Then you shall take the consecrating bull, and burn it in the precincts of the temple, outside the sanctuary. And on the 2nd day you shall offer a perfect he-goat for consecration, and consecrate the altar as they consecrated with the bullock. When you have completed the consecration, offer a perfect bullock from the fold, and a perfect ram from the flock. Present them before the ever-living, when the priest shall scatter salt upon them, and offer them as a burnt offering to the ever-living. Do this for 7 days. Consecrate a goat daily, and a bullock from the fold, and a ram from the flock. Offer daily for 7 days, and expiate for the altar, and purify it, and fill its hands. When these days are completed, then upon the 8th day and forwards, let the priests offer upon the altar the burnt offerings and the peace offerings, and I will accept you, says the mighty Lord. Chapter 44. He then returned with me to the outer gate of the sanctuary facing the east, but it was shut. The Lord said to me, "This gate shall be shut, it shall not be opened, and no one shall enter by it, for the ever-living, the God of Israel, has entered by it. Therefore it shall be shut. The Prince of Princes shall sit in it to eat bread before the ever-living. He can enter by the path of the porch gate, and go out by the same path." He afterwards took me to the north gate in front of the temple, when I looked and saw the temple full of the splendor of the life, and inclined my face downwards, when the Lord said to me, "Son of Adam, fix your heart, and observe with your eyes, and listen with your ears to all that I may say to you, to all the rules of the ever-living's temple, and to all its forms. And fix in your mind the passages of the structure, and all the gangways of the sanctuary, and tell the rebels of the house of Israel, Thus says the mighty Lord, you have added to yourselves, beyond all your depravities, house of Israel, the bringing in of foreigners of filthy mind and filthy body to reside in my sanctuary, to defile my temple. And you allow them to present my bread and fat and blood, and break my covenant by all your depravities. You have also not guarded my sacred trusts, but have appointed guardians of my trusts from yourselves in my sanctuary. Thus says the mighty Lord, any son of a foreigner of filthy mind and filthy body shall not enter my sanctuary, or any son of a foreigner who resides amongst the children of Israel, for even the Levites who deserted from me in the desertion of Israel, when they deserted from me to follow idols, they shall bear their crime. They may, however, be appointed guards at the gates of my sanctuary, as guards of the gates of the temple, and guards of the temple. They may not, however, slay the burnt offerings and sacrifices for the people, or stand before them to administer, because they administered for them before the idols, and were a cause of sin to the house of Israel. Therefore I have lifted up my hand against them, the mighty Lord declared, and they shall bear their punishment, and not approach as priests to me, or approach to any of the sacred matters of the Holy of Holies, but shall suffer for the shame and depravity they have practiced. But I permit them to guard the trusts of the temple, in any of its services, or anything that is done for it. But the Levitical priests, the descendants of Zadok, who guarded the trusts of the sanctuary when the children of Israel deserted from me, they shall approach to me to administer, and stand before me to present the fat and the blood, the mighty Lord said. But when they arrive at the gates of the inner court, they must clothe in linen clothing, and no woolen must be on them, whilst they officiate in the inner court and the temple. They must wear linen turbans on their heads, and linen trousers on their loins. They shall not gird themselves in sweat. And when they proceed to the outer court of the people, they shall put off their official robes, and place them in the sacred vestry, and clothe in other robes, that they may not be worshipped by the people because of their robes. They must not shave their heads, and shall not cultivate curls. They must keep their heads tidy. Nor may any priest drink wine when going into the inner court. Nor may they marry widows or divorced women as their wives, but only a maiden of the race of the house of Israel, or marry a widow who is the widow of a priest. They must also instruct my people in the difference between holiness and defilement, and between corruption and purity. And in a dispute they shall stand to decide by my decrees, and decide it by my decrees and my laws and institutions, in every court they hold, and they must respect my appointments. And they shall not go and pollute themselves for the death of a man, but for a father or mother, or son or daughter, or brother or sister who has not a husband, they may pollute themselves. After it, however, they must seclude themselves for 7 days. Then, on the day he enters into the inner court, to officiate in the sanctuary, he shall offer for his own pollution, the mighty Lord commands. They shall, however, have an endowment. I will be their endowment, so a holding shall not be given to them in Israel. I will be their holding. They shall eat the food offerings, and the sin offerings, and trespass offerings, and everything dedicated in Israel shall be theirs, with the first product of all cattle of all kinds, and every offering of all kinds. From all of your offerings of every kind there shall be made offerings to the priests. You must also give the first fruits of your grain to the priests, to bring a blessing upon your house. The priests may not eat of any dead carcass, or what has been torn by bird or beast. Chapter 45. And when you allot the country into estates, you must give to the ever-living as a sanctification from the country a length of 25,000 rods long and 10,000 broad, which shall be sacred all around its borders. From this there shall be taken for the sanctuary a surface of 500 by 500, with 50 cubits round it for a suburb. So by this measurement measure a length of 25,000 and a breadth of 10,000, and the holiest sanctuary shall be in it. It shall be dedicated by the country to the priests who officiate in the sanctuary of the ever-living, and shall be a place for their homes, and be most sacred. And 25,000 rods long and 10,000 broad shall be assigned for the Levites who officiate in the temple, for them to hold as 20 residential towns. And give as township holdings 5,000 broad and 25,000 long. It must be alongside that consecrated by the parliament of the house of Israel. And assign to the prince on each side of the consecrated endowment, and of the township holdings on each side, at the front of the consecrated endowment, and at the front of the township holdings, on the western side westwards, and on the eastern side eastwards, and along each side of the estates, from the western boundary to the eastern boundary. That land shall be his estate in Israel, so that the princes may no more oppress my people, but they shall assign the country to the house of Israel by their tribes. Princes of Israel, says the mighty Lord, let this be enough for you. Reject oppression and violence, and practice the just and the right. Remove your confiscations from my people, says the mighty Lord. Let there be right scales, and right ephah, and a right bath. Let the ephah and the bath be proportionate, the bath to carry the 10th of a homer, and the ephah the 10th of a homer. Let the homer itself be the standard. And the shekel shall be 20 grains. Your manna shall be 25 shekels, and 20 shekels, and 5 shekels. And this is the taxation which shall be imposed: the 1/6 of an ephah from the homer of wheat, and the 1/6 of an ephah from the homer of barley. And the proportion from a bath of oil, the 10th of a bath from a cor, of 10 baths, that is a homer, because the baths are a homer. And 1 lamb out of a flock of 200 from the water meadows of Israel, for food offerings, and burnt offerings, and thank offerings, to expiate for them, the mighty Lord commands. All the population of the country shall be subject to this taxation to the prince of Israel, and it shall be incumbent upon the prince to provide the burnt offerings, and thank offerings, and drink offerings at the festivals, and months, and on the Sabbaths. And at all the assemblies of the house of Israel he shall provide the sin offerings, and the food offerings, and the thank offerings, to expiate for the parliament of the house of Israel. The mighty Lord commands thus: On the 1st of the 1st month you shall provide a perfect bullock from the fold, and purify the sanctuary. And the priest shall take some of the blood, and put upon the doorposts of the temple, and the 4 corners of the landing of the altar, and upon the posts of the gates of the inner court, and do the same on the 7th of the month, for general faults or errors, and expiate for them in the temple. At the beginning of the 14th day of the month you shall prepare yourselves for the feast of the Passover for 7 days, by eating unfermented bread. And the prince shall provide on that day, on account of himself and on account of the people of the country, a bullock for a sin offering. He shall also provide, during the 7 days of the feast, as a burnt offering to the Lord, 7 perfect bullocks, and 7 rams a day, for 7 days, and as a sin offering, a he-goat daily, and as food offering he shall also provide an ephah for a bullock, and an ephah for a ram, and a hin of oil with the ephah. In the 7th month, on the 15th day, he shall provide the same for 7 days, similar sin offerings, similar burnt offerings, and similar food offerings, with similar oil. Chapter 46. The mighty Lord said also, The gate of the inner court facing the east shall be closed for 6 working days, but upon the day of rest it shall be opened, and upon the day of new moon. Then the prince shall come towards the porch outside the gate, and stand before the doors of the gate, while the priest prepares his burnt offering and his thank offering, and he shall bow at the threshold of the gate. He may afterwards enter, and the gate shall not be shut until the evening. But the people of the country shall worship in the square of the same gate before the Lord on the Sabbaths and new moons. And the burnt offerings that the prince shall present to the Lord on the day of rest are 6 perfect lambs and a perfect ram, with a food offering of an ephah with the ram, and with the lambs a food fixed by his own hand, and a hin of oil. And on the day of new moon a perfect bullock from the fold, and 6 lambs and a ram. They must be perfect. He shall also provide an ephah with the bullock, and an ephah with the ram as a food offering, and with the lambs whatever his hand suggests, and a hin of oil to the ephah. And when the prince arrives opposite the porch of the gate, he shall enter and leave by the same way. But when the people of the country come before the Lord of the assemblies, they must enter by the way of the north gate to the services, going out by the way of the south gate. But those arriving by way of the south gate shall go out by way of the north gate. They must not return by way of the gate they entered, but depart by the opposite one. But the princes shall enter, and as they depart, they shall depart by the same way. At the festivals, however, and at the assemblies, there shall be a food offering of an ephah with a bullock, and an ephah with a ram, and what his hand gives with the lambs, and a hin of oil with an ephah. But when the prince makes a vow of a burnt offering, or has vowed a thank offering to the ever-living, you shall open the gate facing the east for him, and he shall provide the burnt offering or the thank offerings as he provides on the Sabbath day. Then he shall depart, and close the gate after him at his departure. And he shall provide daily as a burnt offering to the ever-living a perfect lamb of a year old. It shall be provided morning by morning, and you shall provide with it morning by morning the 1/6 of an ephah and the 1/3 of a hin of oil to mix the fine flour of the food offering to the ever-living as a regular rule forever. They shall thus provide the lamb and the food offering and the oil morning by morning as a regular burnt offering. The mighty Lord also said, If the prince gives some of his inheritance as a gift to any one amongst his sons, it shall belong to his sons. They shall hold it as an estate. But if he gives a gift from his property to one of his ministers, it shall only be his until the year of release, then return to the prince, because his estate is for his children, and shall come to them. The prince, however, shall not seize any estate from the people to deprive them of their property, but his children shall inherit his own property. Therefore he shall not tear away from my people their possessions. He then took me through the passage at the side of the gate of the sleeping rooms, reserved for the priests, facing the north, and I noticed there a space at the back, towards the west. He then said to me, That is the place where the priests must boil the trespass and sin offerings, where they must bake the food offering without going to the outer court to inconvenience the people. He next took me to the outer court, and went with me to the 4 corners of the court, and I perceived a court at each corner of the court. And to the 4 corners of the court, courts were attached, of 40 long and 30 broad. They were the same measure at each of the 4 corners. And there was a colonnade round them, with boilers fixed around under the colonnade. Then he said to me, In this boiler house the officials of the temple shall boil the sacrifices of the people. Chapter 47. Then he took me back into the entrance of the temple, and I perceived water issuing from under the entrance of the temple eastwards, for the front of the temple was towards the east, and the waters descended from under the right side of the temple, on the south of the altar. Then he led me towards the north gate, and took me round by the way outside the gate along the road that faces eastward. And I observed the waters trickling from the right side, as the man went eastward with the line in his hand, and measured 1,000 cubits. Then he passed me through the waters, the increasing waters. He measured 1,000 again, and passed me through the waters up to the knees. Then he measured another 1,000, and passed me through water to the waist. Again he measured 1,000 of a river that I could not pass through. The waters had risen to a swimming river that could not be forded. He then asked me, "Son of man, have you seen?" and brought me back to the bank of the river. On my return I perceived a very great forest on both sides of the river, and he said to me, "These waters will come out from Galilee to flow towards the east, and will run down over the burnt desert, and arrive at the sea of the corrupted, and will purify that sea. And it will become a perfect living life, which will be productive in all to whom it may come. There shall be 2 living rivers, and they shall have very many fish when these waters have come there, for they will restore to health and life all who come there to the river. Fishermen also will be stationing themselves beside it from Gedidy to Eglaim, casting their nets. There will be very many fish of every kind, like the fish of the great sea, but its marshes and fens will not be rectified, they will be abandoned to salt. And by the river up to its banks, on both sides, every kind of fruit tree will spring up with unfading foliage and unfailing fruit, produced monthly, for the waters proceed from the sanctuary, and the fruit will feed, and the foliage restore to health. Thus says the mighty Lord, you shall divide the country into estates within these boundaries to the 12 tribes of Israel. To Joseph 2 districts, and the others each equal to their brothers, since I have lifted up my hand to give it to your ancestors, you shall allot the country thus to yourselves, by districts. And this shall be the boundary of the country on the northern side. From the great sea towards Haphlon to the path of Zedad, Hamath, Berothah, Sibraim, which is between the border of Damascus and the border of Ramath, Khazar in the nook on the pass of Hamram. And the boundary farthest from the sea shall be Hazar Ammon upon the borders of Damascus to the north of the border of Hamath. That shall be the north boundary. And the eastern side shall be from between Horan and Damascus, and Gilad, with the Jordan between the land of Israel. Measure for the border to the east of the lake of the Cadmonites. That is the eastern side. And south side, on the right hand, from Tamar to the dividing brook of Kadesh, that flows to the great sea. This is the right hand side to the south. And the west side shall be the great sea, from the border stretching to the pass of Hamath. That is the west side. And you shall divide this country for yourselves amongst the tribes of Israel. And you shall divide it into districts for yourself by lot, and for the foreigners who reside amongst you, who have begotten children amongst you. For they shall be the same as the natives of the sons of Israel. They shall be allotted properties amongst the tribes of Israel. And in the tribe where the foreigner resides, his estate shall be given. The mighty Lord commands this. Chapter 48. Now this is the muster roll of the tribes. From the north end at the side of the Hethlon road to the pass of Hamath at Khazar Ammon on the border of Damascus northward towards the side of Hamath, they shall face east and west. Dan first, and the border of Dan shall face east and west. Dan 1. And on the border of Dan, facing east and west, Ashur 1. And on the border of Ashur, facing east and west, Naphtali 1. And on the border of Naphtali, facing east and west, Manasseh 1. And on the border of Manasseh, facing east and west, Ephraim 1. And on the border of Ephraim, facing east and west, Reuben 1. And on the border of Reuben, facing east and west, Judah 1. And on the border of Judah, facing east and west, there shall be the grant which you must grant of 25,000 rods broad, and the length the same as the portion from east to west. And the sanctuary shall be the center of the grant that you grant to the ever-living, of 25,000 long and 10,000 broad. And alongside this shall be the sacred grant for the priests. On the north 25,000 reeds long, on the west 10,000 broad, and on the east 10,000, and on the south 25,000 long. And it shall be consecrated to the ever-living amongst you, for the consecrated priests of the descendants of Zadok, who guarded my trusts, who did not revolt to the depravities of the children of Israel when the Levites revolted. Consequently, the boundaries of the grant, granted from the land, shall be most sacred to you. And alongside the borders of the priests there shall be for the Levites 25,000 reeds long and 10,000 broad. All the length shall be 25,000, and the breadth 10,000, and they shall not sell it from themselves, nor exchange nor transfer the firstfruits of the land, for it is consecrated to the ever-living. And 5,000 reeds in breadth shall be left in the front of the 25,000. It shall be as common to build villages, and for pasture, and with a town in the center, whose measurements shall be these: the north face 4,500, and the south face 4,500, and the eastern face 4,500, and the western face 4,500. There shall also be suburbs for the town towards the north 250, and on the south 250, and on the east 250, and on the west 250. And the remainder of the length alongside the consecrated grant of 2,000 eastward and 10,000 westward, that is connected with the consecrated grant, its products shall be for the police expenses of the city, and the police of the city from all the tribes of Israel shall cultivate it. The whole that is consecrated shall be a square of 25,000 by 25,000. You shall assign the sacred grants with the holdings for the city. And the portion for the prince shall be on each side of the sacred grant, and of the holdings for the city, on the front of the grant of 25,000 from the eastern border, and on the opposite western face 25,000 adjoining the grant for the prince, shall be the sacred offering, and the sanctuary of the temple shall be in its center. However, the holdings of the Levites and the holdings for the city shall be in the center of what belongs to the prince. What is between the borders of Judah and the borders of Benjamin shall also belong to the prince. And for the rest of the tribes facing from east to west, Benjamin 1. And on the border of Benjamin facing east to west, Simeon 1. And on the border of Simeon facing east to west, Issachar 1. And on the border of Issachar facing east to west, Zebulun 1. And on the border of Zebulun facing east and west, Gad 1. And on the border of Gad, on the south, towards the right hand, the border shall be from Tamar on the brook dividing the vale of Kadesh to the great sea. This is the country you shall divide into districts for the tribes of Israel, and these are their portions, said the mighty Lord. And these shall be the dimensions of the city: the north side, an extent of 4,500, with gates to the city, bearing the names of the tribes of Israel. 3 gates on the north: the gate of Reuben 1, the gate of Judah 1, the gate of Levi 1. And the eastern face 4,500, with 3 gates: the gate of Joseph 1, the gate of Benjamin 1, the gate of Dan 1. And the southern face 4,500, in extent, with 3 gates: the gate of Simeon 1, the gate of Issachar 1, the gate of Zebulun 1. The western face 4,500, with its 3 gates: the gate of Gad 1, the gate of Ashur 1, the gate of Naphtali 1. It will thus be 18,000 in circuit. And from that day, the name of the city, the Lord's Home. The end of chapters 43 through 48, and the end of the book of Ezekiel, from the Holy Bible in Modern English, translated by Ferrar Fenton. Recording by Mark Penfold.